For those of you who don't know me, my name's Colleen. I lead the programming for the battery, and this is one of my favorite events that we do. This is our second year in a row doing it with Joanna from by way of Greece. So she is up bright and early tomorrow. But tonight we're going to look at our 2022 astrological forecast. So as I mentioned, we are recording tonight. Joanna's got a really amazing deck of information that we'll share after along with the recording, so you can dive in and revisit so we can get through a whole year. Just a little bit about Joanna. She's been a practicing witch and astrologer for the better part of 20 years. You may know her from her work at the Battery during at member events, or from Mystic Mondays, and we did it in early 2020. Remember when we could all hang out. She's an intuitive guide, herbalist, astrologer, writer, and researcher of everything occult and folk magic. She's writing a book about all the crazy parties she's thrown for a living, and maintains a remote healing practice in the form of Red Cat, which we'll share a link. She loves dismantling preconceived notions people have about astrology and is dedicated to helping people find their truth. So I'm going to hand it over to Joanna, and she's going to take us through 2022.
Awesome. Thank you, Colleen, so much. Thanks everybody for being here. Like Colleen said, it is the future for me. So what a better way to dive into a forecast. So I just want to say I'm about to hit you with like a wall of information. Keep whatever you can. If you want to pull your journals out to like write down dates, that's fine, but you're also going to get the deck as well. And then yeah, I'm just going to go right in, and anything else that comes up, please feel free to ask questions. I'm going to try and have some time for that. So let's go. Okay. And I'll make sure I can see. What is astrology even? That's my thing always. So astrology is a system of giving meaning. It is similar to other self-exploration tools like psychology, like any, human design, which is your birth date. So I'm very convinced it came from astrology. Enneagram, anything like that, right? If you're interested in investigating more about yourself, that's how that goes. It is based on a geocentric view of the sky and the seasons. This is really important because NASA every year is like, or every few years is like, it's the stars are not in the same location. It's like, yes, we know. It's an ancient system of looking at the sky, and that's how we assign meaning to it. Astrology is not the truth, right? It is not prescriptive, which means that's like the biggest hang up that people have with it. I feel it's not going to tell you what to do. It just gives you, it's just like another tool, like we said. It is not future telling in the sense that nothing is and everything is, right? You can't exactly predict the future or know exactly what's going to happen, but if you want to see the energies that are coming into play, or like good times for you or for the world, etc., like it can be as microscopic or as macroscopic as you want it to be. And I should probably not say this as an astrologer, but it's also not necessary. You can live your entire life never looking at a chart, never looking at astrology, never reading your horoscope, and that's fine. That would be fine. But if you want to, we're here. Common misconceptions that I love to, dismantle. We are not our sun. Leos are the ones who cannot handle this the most. We are becoming our sun. The idea is that, like, yes, the sun is really important and it is your soul's purpose and it is where you're trying to go. But how you get there and everything that happens in between is the study of astrology. Because we are not our sun, we all contain all of the signs, all of the planets, and some aspects. There are no good or bad. Like I've heard very often in my life, oh, I don't date Scorpios. It's like, that's not how it works, because the Scorpio is somewhere in your chart doing something. Like just because someone's sun is in Scorpios, but just because someone's sun is in Scorpio doesn't mean that that's, the definition of a human, right? And if you are into reading astrology and if you're into studying it, you should not read your sun sign, but you should read your rising sign. I want to dive into this just very briefly because it's helpful to have some visual support. So I use a system of astrology called is traditional astrology, also known as Hellenistic astrology. That is because I'm Greek, but also because I find it to be the system that works the best. It is not the only system. There are many systems within astrology. It is just the way that I like to work with it. I also find it very helpful for beginners and a way of understanding things, because what it does is it separates the whole zodiac into an equal, each house, each little like section of the pie here it's called a house. Each house contains one sign. So it's much easier to look at the sky when things are like really organized, right? So what happens is the reason you need to read your rising sign is this. If you have this person, this is some random chart that I pulled. It's nobody, or somebody, it's somebody. So this here little doodad is the sun. So if you are interested in, if you're reading your horoscope, it means that people are looking at transits, right? That the planets, like this is someone's natal chart, and there are planets keep moving around and they're doing things on top of your chart, really like lightly put. Say that, there's a full moon happening over here in Cancer. If somebody wants to talk about, if an astrologer is going to talk about this full moon in Cancer and how it's impacting you, if you read you're a Capricorn, right? If you read like this person is, if you're reading your Capricorn sun, it assumes that your sun is over here in the first house. So if it's going to be talking about this full moon in Cancer, it's going to talk about your seventh house and what that represents in your life. In this case, it's committed partnerships. So it's going to be talking about relationships and stuff. However, if you're a Capricorn who was born after or before sunrise, your rising sign is going to be something different than Capricorn. This person here, their rising sign is Libra. Their 10th house, their Cancer, where the full moon is, falls in a completely different area of their life. So say they're a Capricorn and they're reading their Capricorn horoscope, it's talking about something that doesn't really impact them as much as it would if they were reading Libra, which is their rising sign, to talk about, oh yeah, actually that is, much more applicable for me. So I'm not saying don't read your sun sign, read that, but definitely also read your rising sign first. Okay, moving on.
Joanna, there's a really quick question that might be relevant. Is a Hellenistic chart the same as a whole signs chart?
Yes.
Cool.
Great question. Yes. It's traditional and Hellenistic astrology works with whole sign charts. Great question. And if people don't know what that means, that's also fine. You don't need to. Okay, so hello, I am Joanna or Antigone. I have two names, super confusing and dramatic in typical Greek fashion. I am a former event planner, like Colleen said. You may know me from the Battery or not, because it's been like 2 years since I've been able to be there. I do a lot of different things. When I worked, anywhere I've worked, people always come to me and they're like, what's happening in the sky? So then I decided to do that full time when the pandemic hit. I go back and forth between Europe and North America. So right now I'm in Europe and I'm drinking coffee, and it is 5 a.m. here. Good morning, everybody. Here's some links to where you can find me. I'm not gonna stick to that too much. So let me see. Sorry, my notes here, just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Great. My whole deal, just so you know, and why I'm doing this, is because I think this astrology and all of these ways that have been passed down to us through ancient times have a lot of information that actually impact us on the daily. And like I said, you don't have to ever look in this, but if you're interested, I'm down. Okay, here's a little cheat sheet about houses and meanings. So each house, like I showed you on the chart, is a different area of life. So if you do know your chart, this is like a nice little cheat sheet to see where things are kind of happening for you. And I just want to go over like a few broad themes for the collective for this year. So there are a few things that are happening that are pretty big, which I'm going to go into, but what we're going to see is we're going to see an increase in pleasure. besides the fact that this is a lover's year in the tarot, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, we're going to see an emphasis on the sensual pleasures, right? Everything that we can experience through our senses, because there's some stuff happening in Taurus, and Taurus is like a Venus ruled, very earthly sign. So it's very much about like how we are embodied and how we get to experience pleasure through our senses. Focus on material abundance, security, food production, material production, these kinds of things. We are also going to see a lot of work on the opposite side of that spectrum. So we are like fully embodied and looking for pleasure, but also there's all this like other super emotional and spiritual side to us, which is going to deal with a lot of like healing and releasing and revealing and exploring of grief, of predetermined like systemic power struggles, how we interact with power, like on a personal level, all of us in very different areas of our lives, but power is an ongoing theme. We seem to like be able to reach over the past next year, maybe year and a half, like some kind of reckoning, like understanding all the harrowing experiences and the horrors, like actually the mysteries, the depth of everything we have dealt with, but on a very deep and intimate level. And with that understanding of it, not always comfortable, like this is a lot of shadow stuff, but that's how we get healing, right? By looking at the thing that we don't want to look at. And there's no escaping that this year, unfortunately. A lot of working with the land, the earth. Venus, Taurus is a very earthen sign. So Uranus is there, and I'm going to talk about that briefly, but there's abrupt chaos, like I like to refer to it, sudden shifts that have to do generally with like how we work with the land, right? What our systems of nourishment are, who has access to food, what kind of food we have access to, like these kinds of things are going to keep unfolding. I do want to mention this has started unfolding, the earth being centered so much, especially during the pandemic as well, because for us, we may have been shut down and restricted and, cut off, but because of that, earth was able to start healing a little bit, like all the levels of the fact that we weren't having so many CO2 emissions, the fact that we weren't driving that much, the fact that we weren't flying that much on a global scale really impacted Earth, the planet itself, in a positive way. It is the Lover's Year in the Tarot, like I mentioned. So I'm going to send something over, like right with this presentation about how to work with the lovers, because since we have such a high focus on pleasure this year, it's going to be great. Individual accountability seems to be the most important thing when it comes to impacting community. And a few things that kind of set the background for the collective, they have started since last year, but they're still there. With Saturn in Aquarius, we have all, shifted to completely new ways of communicating. Even the people who weren't using, say, Zoom for their daily meetings now have to. New systems, these things that are happening with like the Great Resignation all around the world at this point, where people are like, no, I'm not going to do that thing because I'm focusing on this other thing, or like this system is no longer working for me. Decentralized currencies, right? You know how that's going right now. Innovations in technology, Web 3.0, like decentralized web, all of these things, a lot of revolution and innovation in that space. And the other thing that we are seeing, and that has already started from last year, is this rigidity and restriction for all of us, right? Where the collective is more important than the individual, which means that it shows up in lockdowns, restrictions, shifts, and this like Uranus thing that is happening in Taurus, all of these like last minute like event planners know this the best. we're scheduling an event, we're working towards it, and then we have to cancel it, we have to shift it, we have to become virtual, we can't be in person, it has to turn hybrid, like all of these things, because we are centering the collective instead of, you know, the individual, which for some people it's really difficult. Okay, so to continue off of that, I'm going off of some things that have already been in the same spot, and they're going to continue being there for 2022. So Saturn entered Aquarius in December 2020. You may have heard about the Great Conjunction. It was like a big topic of conversation because it set like a new era, not just because it was Saturn, but because it was conjunct Jupiter. So you want to look at the part of your chart that contains Aquarius to see how this is unfolding. It'll still be here for another year and a half. So all of 2022 and about half of 2023. There is no escape. I keep saying that, it sounds really ominous, but the thing about Saturn, I have some questions here that you can work with and that you can keep coming back to every now and then. But the thing that Saturn is here to ask, Saturn is the planet of maturity. Saturn demands maturity. You need to grow the fuck up, like real quick with Saturn. And if you're not ready for it, it's gonna kick your ass. So you may have heard the term like Saturn return. For people in their late 20s, their late 50s, and late 80s, I don't think we have anyone in that group here, but you're going through this phase of growth. And in astrology, and I think you can see that in society as well, you're considered fully an adult once you've gone through your Saturn return, which is when you're 30. Like you're like, okay, I know what's happening. So Big Daddy Saturn, as we refer to him, is here to like make sure you buckle up. It's all about rigidity and structures, which is why we saw it so much in 2021 as well. It felt like a little difficult. Right before it went to Aquarius, it was in Capricorn. So it has been feeling really dour for the past couple of years. Like really it has. Restriction being the biggest word here. I do want to say though, it has not, all of 2020, there's been like difficult aspects that Saturn has been making to Pluto, which is why 2020 was so intense. 2021 has still been making some aspects, but it's not as intense. And 2022 is definitely a release in all of these aspects that we've been feeling. So we are starting to adjust to the restriction, or the restrictions are adjusting to what is happening. It doesn't really matter which is first. What matters is how we feel about it. And I do want to mention that in Aquarius, Saturn can do magical things. So the last time it was here, it was 1991 to 1993, which sees the dismantling of apartheid in South Africa. Before then, it was here in 1962, 1963, which was like deep in the civil rights movement and the Civil Rights Act. And even before then, it was here in 1932 to 1934, which was right after, right, the Great Depression, or like in that aspect of the Great Depression, where was the beginning of FDR's like New Deal, which brought Social Security, banking regulations, these kinds of things. So I'm really curious to see what Saturn in Aquarius is going to do this time, but just to give you a point of reference for that. Okay. Venus is retrograde in Capricorn. This happened December 2021. Last time it was here, it was during the end of 2013 and beginning of 2014. So check your journals if you're a journaler, check your emails if you still have those email accounts, check what was going on, because it's all about the structure of your relationships, and the way you communicate about them, particularly because it's such, Capricorn is as well an earthen sign, and Capricorn rules the skeletal system. So it's really a good time to look at relationship dynamics, relationship patterns. It's not so much about like who has the power. It's more about how you as an individual respond and react to and relate to everyone else and everything else around you. So retrogrades can be really scary because they get a really bad rap. I don't know why. It's because of Mercury, which we'll talk about. But retrogrades are a really, really good time to review and to edit. So it's anything that comes in, anything new that happens during a time like this, it's like really, really good to investigate and just, have a discerning eye. And it'll be retrograde here until the end of January, but then it'll completely leave here mid-February. So this part of your chart. Jupiter in Pisces, this just happened. You probably felt it, even though you may not have known that this happened. So Jupiter into Pisces, it was in Pisces briefly from May to October 2021, which was also the time where most of the world, we were able to like open up, start connecting with other people, right? Start feeling this like sense of freedom a little bit more, start feeling the need to be in physical spaces with other people, feeling a bit of an ease in this space, being able to dream, right? That's when most events were booked for the end of 2021 and 2022. It's like, oh yeah, we'll be in person again, or we'll be close again, in a way that feels very rejuvenating and restoring for our systems, as like humans, and the way we feel, like the soft parts of us, right? So, and then it came back into Aquarius for a little bit. So now it went fully into Pisces, where it's going to be there for the greater part of the year. It's going to be there until May again. Then it's going to go into Aries briefly until October, and it's going to come back into Pisces. So this is just a very good transit to work with for everyone. Check again the area of your chart that Pisces is in, because that'll give you kind of like a hint of where this might happen more for you. But Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of abundance, of good fortune, of good patrons. Like it's this very, like Jupiter is the person you want at your party always, because they just have this like grandiose way of bringing in good luck. It's that person. In Pisces, it's one of its rulers. Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. So it's like so happy to be there. Like Jupiter has had difficulty. It's been in Capricorn. It's been in Aquarius, which is a little better, but still not that. So in Pisces, it's like, oh, finally I can party. I feel cute. I'm going to go to parties. I'm going to see people. So it's that vibe. Great vibe, I think, for the beginning of the year. Again, if you want to explore your relationship with abundance, generally, philosophies of life, that's the wisdom traditions that I'm mentioning here. It's like, what guides me on the daily? What do I want more of? Where do I want to go? And if you want to tie this back into the themes of the year, how does this bring me joy? And how can I move like in pleasure? And how can I move into pleasure with abundance? It's been very hard. I don't want to make any assumptions about anybody. No matter how good things may look or may have been for all of us, the past 2 years have been like really freaking intense. So it's really nice to center this intentionally as part of what we're doing in 2022. I personally was like, you know what? Only pleasure for 2022. That's it. I don't do things that don't feel good. Done. Even though I woke up at 4 a.m. today. So dates down here for your reference. I also have them later. Okay. Big other thing that's happening that impacts us all on a collective and on an individual level, more specifically. The nodes of the moon are changing signs. This happens every year and a half. The nodes are points that I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty right now. They're not actual planetary bodies. They're just points, but they're really important because they seem to affect us on a big scale all of the time. So they're always opposite each other. So they're always moving on the chart completely exact opposition of each other. That's where eclipses happen. So okay, I want to talk about the nodes first. So the North Node is a point of increase, of amplification, of where the desire is, where the hunger is, and where we can go into excess very much. The North Node in our birth chart shows us kind of what we need to learn in this lifetime. The South Node are things that in our birth chart we have to like reckon with and heal and purge and like know kind of, it's stuff that we know, but we also are bringing into this lifetime that we have to like find the balance between what we need to learn and what we need to let go of. The fact that they're opposite means that you have these opposing forces always push and pulling. So it's up to the embodied experience to like maintain that balance. The South Node, like I mentioned, even as a transit, right, what's happening right now is a point of release, healing, purging, surrender, things that like no longer work, things that feel like they're coming to an end of their own accord. That's the other thing. Like it feels organic no matter which direction we go. So the past year and a half, the nodes have been in Gemini and in Sagittarius, respectively, since like mid-July of 2020, mid-2020. So Gemini was like the North Node and Sagittarius is the South Node. They are shifting on the 18th of January, and the North Node is going into Taurus and the South Node is going into Scorpio. So that's the dynamic that I was mentioning earlier, that you're dealing with a lot of like, okay, increase in like the physical sensations and the things that, and the pleasures and the senses and the, anything Venusian. But then you also have this like Scorpionic South Node, which, just get ready. It's going to be intense. Intense on a personal level too, though, like, and good. Getting rid of, I don't really assign those meanings to things, but it's very, very good to like get rid of the stuff that no longer serves us. And you caught a glimpse about like around what that's going to feel like around November 19th. That was the first eclipse that happened on this axis. So check your journals. I think people felt this one quite a lot. And they weren't realizing what was happening. Okay, so eclipses come in seasons. They always happen on the axis. So there's like a 2-week period that we're always like in eclipse season when it happens. So as you can see, the first set of eclipses is on April 30th and May 15th. So you see that's like 2 weeks of each other. There's a solar eclipse in Taurus on April 30th, the lunar eclipse in Scorpio on May 15th. And then again later in the year, October 25th, the eclipse in Scorpio, and then November 8th, the eclipse in Taurus. So around eclipse seasons, I just want to mention that for, tens of thousands of years, humans were living without man-made light, basically, this kind of light that we have, electricity. And the light was really, really important to our ancestors. And for humans, I mean, until very recently, think about it, right? The natural light. So whenever the luminaries, right, either the moon or the sun are being snuffed out suddenly, it brings the fear of the dark. We all have the fear of the dark, whatever that manifests like for us. Maybe you're not afraid if you're walking in your apartment at night, but maybe the fear of the dark is the unknown, or it's the shadow work, right? The aspects of ourselves that we don't know, or the aspects of everything that we don't know. So things to just keep in mind. Like I like marking those days on the calendar because, like I said, you don't have to, but if you do, go dark. The lights are going out, you go out. Turn off your phone, stay away from screens, rest, take baths, anything that has to do with self-care, making nourishing meals. This is going to be really important for this axis of eclipses. Feeding yourself physically in a way that supports you and sustains you. Great times to like do tarot readings, do divination work, do dream work, like, set intentions for dreaming and be like, show me whatever I want to know. Great time for shadow work, doing, call your therapist. That's a great thing to do during eclipse season. And remember to practice patience and grace. It's really hard. It always feels like, I don't know, it feels uncomfortable. And for me, it helps me know what's going on. For other people, you don't have to, but just keep it in mind. Do not go wild. Like I tell people, running around in the eclipse. This is not a good time to do manifesting and intention setting work. I know that people who work with the moon or work with these kinds of energies always are, it's like a new moon, we set intentions, a full moon, we release or we harvest whatever it was that we set. Eclipses are not time to do that. They are a great time for spell work, but not a good time to be like, I want this to come in. Like, we're not calling things in during eclipses. We're just shedding, letting it go. Great time to journal. Do not dive into self-criticism. It's very easy to do, especially with the Scorpio stuff, right? Because it's bringing us the shadow, man. Like, we're not avoiding that this year. So don't lean into the hunger in the sense that, like, the desire to go nuts and live crazy, debaucherous lives might be there. So just, you can do that. I just don't know how much it's going to serve you. Okay. Mercury retrograde, my favorite thing, my baddie. A few notes on Mercury retrogrades. They are not bad. Like I mentioned, retrogrades are reviews. So you see, it's a time period during which we are asked to review, reevaluate, reimagine, reflect, redesign, all of the re's. Mercury is the communicator, right? It's the messenger, it's the trickster, it's in charge of information. It's really scary when it goes retrograde because it fucks with our basics. I'm sorry, I didn't ask if I can cuss. I always cuss. Let me know if it's offensive, I'll stop. What we need is patience to get through this, to allow for more time to get places, allow for more time to get set up on the Zoom meeting, allow just more time to communicate. People lose their phones, they drop them in the toilet. People get into accidents. That, like, be careful about driving. When you're booking flights, if you're booking a trip during Mercury retrograde, like, just go to the airport much earlier. Double check the gas tank, these kinds of things. It's kind of ridiculous how on point this is. But I know people who don't leave their houses when there's Mercury retrograde, and I think that's a little intense. You can still live your life. So these are the Mercury retrograde periods for 2022. If you want to take a note, especially if you are a Mercury ruled sign. So if you're Gemini or Virgo, it seems to affect y'all a little bit more than other ones. I do want to say that last year, if you remember the Mercury retrograde periods of last year, they were all also in air signs. This year, they are partially in air signs as well. So it's a little more felt, if you will, because Mercury rules communication, which lives in the mind and ideas and these kinds of things. And air signs also do that. So when Mercury, like when the imbalance lives to be in a place that it's very happily imbalanced, we feel a little bit stronger than other things. In the physical, yeah, we'll see this. I'm very curious about this end of the year one, the December 29th, because it's happening right on top of Pluto. So we are definitely learning a lot. Like, stuff is being revealed that needs to be reviewed about the structures of power. Can't wait for that one. Okay. Important dates that are happening if you want to take your journals out. So I have them in quarters because my brain works that way. So Q1, not much is happening. It's all in the beginning of the quarter. But like I said, Mercury stations retrograde in Aquarius. The nodes change signs on the 18th. Venus stations direct on the 29th. And February 3rd, Mercury stations direct. Yeah, don't want to spend too much time here because I've already spoken about that. Q2, more things are happening, as you can see here. So Mars conjunct Saturn is kind of a big thing that I want you to keep in mind. It's on April 4th, and it's in Aquarius. So Mars and Saturn are the hardest planets in our solar system, astrologically speaking. They are very different energies. Mars is very hot and aggressive, and it's the planet of war, and it's also the planet generally of drive and desire and action and all of these things. It can be really impatient. It's like very forceful. I would like to remind everyone that last year when we did this event was January 6th, which is the day that Mars changed signs very suddenly, and it was the day that the Capitol was stormed. So that happened. So just to get an idea of like Mars energy, Saturn, like I said, is the planet that requires us to grow up. It requires us to be very diligent and to do all of the work that we need to do. No fun allowed. So these two planets, it's hard for them to be in the same space. Last time this happened was March of 2020, which was the beginning of lockdowns for everybody. So, and the world in the beginning of the pandemic. So, and it was a lot of Saturn Mars aspects that were happening in 2020 that led to, you know, what 2020 became. This has a different feel to it because it is the end of that cycle of aspects. So we don't expect, we, the astrologers, don't expect this to be what what March 2020 was. But it's important to see, it's important work on the individual to check on boundaries, what we're learning about boundaries, where boundaries need to be set, where boundaries have been set and we don't like it. Just that kind of work, because there's a lot of frustration and anger that comes here. And anger is a very important emotion to show us, first of all, where we need to do more work. And second of all, where we need to remove the obstacles that are in our way, or how to at least reckon with them if it feels oppressive. And this combination of planets and the place that it's in kind of like encourages separation, right? Which is what we saw manifest in like the lived experience at the time. But because it's more than just physical, it's very philosophical in this place. So just keep that in mind. Next aspect that is kind of big, April 12th, Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Pisces. It doesn't, I'm just bringing it to y'all's attention because it's not, Neptune is a very slow moving planet. Neptune is the new ruler of Pisces, like not in traditional astrology, but when we are talking about it from a traditional perspective, we can't neglect that fact. So Jupiter and Neptune, right, the two rulers of Pisces are coming to hang out together in Pisces. So last time this happened was 1856. Not much to phone home about for that time, but I do want to bring into y'all's attention that it was a big growth. We saw a big increase in spirituality, the paranormal, seances, right? That's the age of spiritualists. That was kind of the vibe of that time that reflects in this kind of conjunction. So there's just like a really interesting buzzing with like magic that happens when these two come together. And we can see a desire for connection and bigger visions, new ideas, new teachers, like a different way of interacting with spirit and magic. However, Neptune always raises red flags because it is very easy to become illusioned. So and it likes to lie, or it likes to conceal the lie. So you're not really sure where the truth is. So just practice a little discernment for that. Again, you want to check out where this is falling in your chart for like more specific things, but as a general vibe to see what it is. Eclipses, Jupiter, like first set of eclipse, Jupiter gets into Aries. It just is, it's a very gutsy like aspect. this is the time. It's going to spend a few months here, and then it's going to come back here at the end of 2022. So we might see like an influx of like startups. It's a very entrepreneurial vibe. It's a very like, let's go do the thing, get money, make abundance, get good luck. Like it's very active. It's very different vibe than when it is in Pisces. So good time to start like new endeavors generally for people, for everybody. It doesn't matter where Aries is for you. So we might see a lot of that happening. Mercury retrograde, like I mentioned, in Gemini, just like, you know, my Gemini sun babies, like take it easy. Eclipse and Mercury direct again. I do want to mention again for Mercury retrogrades that there is a time period where you might be feeling the Mercury retrograde vibe. Still, always 2 weeks and before and after it stations retrograde and direct. I haven't put those dates in here because you don't need all of the nitty-gritty, but if you're interested, just keep that in mind. It's what we call the retrograde shadow period. I personally feel the shadow more than the retrograde, but to each their own. Okay, Q3. July 26th is going to be kind of a big July 26th and August 1st. So what happens is the North Node that is in Taurus goes and sits on top of Uranus, which has been in Taurus. And then Mars also goes there too. So they're all hanging out together in Taurus. This is a good time to not overbook yourself. It kind of has the vibe of abrupt chaos. Like Uranus is the planet of innovation, of newness, of surprises, of sudden changes. It's abrupt chaos. It's chaos neutral. If it's going to be chaos positive or chaos negative, that's kind of up to other things. This is chaos neutral. But it's something that, you know, is kind of going to shake us on some level. I feel also because Mars is like such a hot planet, Taurus is the earth, Uranus like shakes things up, like it might literally shake things up. So I'm seeing or feeling like it could be earthquake, fire, volcano thing, like something like that is the general vibe. So that's, you know, keep that in mind. It can be very explosive, challenging, just something that doesn't feel like we can control. This August 7th square, again, Mars and Saturn don't like playing together. The square is one of the hardest aspects that we have in astrology. So just, this is kind of like closing the loop on that April 4th thing that we talked about earlier, on that April 4th conjunction. So once that passes, you'll be able to be more aware of what this August 7th thing means for you. Great. August 20th. That's the other thing. Mars enters Gemini. So it's going to be here, just as a point of reference, Mars spends around 2 months in each sign, unless there's a retrograde. So this year there's a retrograde. It's like every 2 years or so. Last time, Mars was in Aries in 2020, and it was retrograding a lot. And it was very challenging for all of us. That's like another reason it was challenging. Now it's in Gemini. It's a very different vibe. It will be retrograding, so it's going to be here for 7 months, like roughly. There is a lot of, this is a placement that words are weapons. So you can use those for good and you can use those for evil. And that is completely up to you. Also, depending on where Gemini is in your chart. However, there's just going to be this like very intense, like upward feeling of action that has to do though with a lot of communication and exchange of ideas and that kind of thing. Mars is the planet of anger as well, but Gemini is so quickly moving that Mars here can't attach itself to any outcome. It's kind of like, got really mad, got over it, moving on, doing this other thing, got super intense again, moving on. Like it's it's very quickly shifting. That's not something that we all are comfortable with. I know for a fact I am not. So that for me is like a really important, August 20th, great, for 7 months. We're going to check this out. The good thing is that whenever the retrograde happens, that's the review time for us. And that's when things start getting slower moving. So depending on how hectic this feels, maybe we'll get a bit of a respite when it goes into this retrograde. And then September 9th, of course, as if that wasn't enough, there's the Mercury retrograde. Okay, and then Q4, a lot of stuff happening always in Q4. So there is, right, Mercury stations direct, Mars square Neptune on October 11th. Nothing major here. I just want to point out the action and the lie, concealment. Neptune has been in Pisces for a really long time. It's hanging out there. That's not the point. Just keep that in mind of like things that you need to be a little more discerning about, or things that maybe you're not getting the whole story about. For October 11th. October 22nd, Venus conjunct Sun in Libra. This is called a cazimi. A cazimi is a conjunction with any planet and the sun. So this just feels, especially since we've gone through this retrograde right at the beginning of the year, and it's the Lover's year in the tarot, this is like a really great moment after Venus has done all of the hard work that it doesn't like to do, to be honest, because Venus is like, can we just keep things cute and shove everything in a drawer and never look at it? So after it's had to look at stuff and you know, it's gone through all of this kind of towards the end of the year here, it goes through this like mega purification process where everything just feels, anything that no longer works has like burnt off of us, and we get to get a much broader perspective on relationships and the bonds we form on a collective level. Additionally, you know, where Libra falls for you, especially if you have Libra or Taurus rising or sun, because those are ruled by Venus. So it's like super potent moment. Like it's great date night too. Like get yourself a date for the night. October 25th, eclipse. October 27th, Jupiter back in Pisces for that last little, you know, thing. October 30th, the last like really big thing is that's when Mars stations retrograde, right, in Gemini that we talked about. So there's a lot of reviewing the direction. You might be going towards one direction, like really head on and being like, I'm doing this thing. And then it's like abrupt halt. Is this the direction that I want to go in? Let me question everything about my actions and then go the different way. So it's kind of, that's the vibe. But it's really, really, really good time to look at how we work with anger, how we work with frustration, how we work with impatience, how we communicate around these things. Yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's it. Eclipse season. This other square, November 19th. So it's coming here to close. So whenever there's a square, it's kind of like it's squaring from the one side, then it goes through and then it squares on the other side. So whatever happened here on October 11th is gonna close that loop on November 19th. Then December 20th, Jupiter enters Aries again, which is now we're going into this like new era, what we talked about that is happening like May, that we got a glimpse of that. We're going back to Pisces to do like a little more dreamy, you know, friendship check-in, and then back into like this action in Aries. And then on December 29th is the last retrograde of the year, which, as I mentioned earlier, is happening right on top of Pluto. So we'll see what happens with like structures and systems of power and that whole thing. A few notes about the Great. Outer planets. Sorry, just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything here. Okay. About the planets that are really slow moving, I like to talk about them kind of all together. So Uranus has been in Taurus since May 2018, and it's going to be there until July 2025. Like I mentioned, the abrupt chaos. But what it's here to do is to, like, whenever all these slow moving planets, they're doing their thing in parts of our chart, but it's really when they come into aspects with another planet where things happen, or if they're gonna like switch to retrograde and then go back. So we talked about a few aspects that Uranus is making to like the other transiting planets, but it's here really to help us figure out like our relationship to the material world and to the earth and to generativity and to how we nourish ourselves, right? These things that we talked about. So the fact that the North Node is going to be there for all of 2022 is, you know, we'll see how this unfolds. I think it's really interesting. Neptune has been in Pisces since April, 2011, and it's going to be there until 2026. So great for dreaming, daydreaming, or like straight up dreaming, creating, painting, drawing. It's like all of these things that live in the subconscious that are that we want to bring forth that help the collective. So this is, again, whenever it makes aspects to other planets, that's important. But if you just want to see like where this energy lives for you, it's in Pisces. And Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008, and it's leaving in 2024. So the work that it's been doing is around the structures, right? You know, 2008 crisis, anybody? Like, it was here to really shake things up and to help us look at, unearth, reveal, right? Just really dig deep into the systems and the structures that have to do with power, that have to do with how we work, that have to do with so many things. So it's kind of been doing that, you know, on its own. And it wasn't until in a lot of aspects with Saturn and Mars. So that was really difficult. But now we're kind of on the other side of that for a while, at least. So it's, you know, great for shadow work in this aspect of your chart. Great to just question everything that you give power to and how to get it back. Briefly. So I just wanted to end with this quote from Carl Jung, who I adore. I also have studied psychology. My therapists are like, astrology is not a thing. I'm like, really? Because Carl Jung thought it was. So yeah, that was that, I think. Yes, great. Questions? I'm going to stop sharing so I can look at more of the chat and things like that.
Thanks, Joanna. There was one question that came in a while ago about Astro Cartography. Do you have any thoughts or comments on Astro Cartography?
Astro Cartography, yes, I have thoughts and comments about that. I don't know how to do that. There are people who do that. What it is the study of, so everything has a chart. And depending on your location on the earth, because because astrology is a geocentric study, depending on your location on the earth, there is a different chart. You can put anything that has a chart, you can compare to see what the relationship with that chart is. Your chart with anything else, your person, you know, this date that you went on, a place, an event, that kind of thing. Astro Cartography does that. They put the place and your chart and kind of look at what aspects, what transits, like, you know, what kind of that thing works for people and help you discern. It is just a tool to discern what location on earth would work for you or not work for you. Briefly.
Thanks. If y'all have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute now and ask Joanna directly.
Yeah.
everyone's still digesting all of the information.
I know. I just want to say, like, it can be really overwhelming and it can be a lot. And, you know, I take notes, I go back, I look at them. Like, you don't have to keep track of this. Just put it on your calendar and then, yeah, just be like, oh, that's why I was feeling weird. Like, okay, it helps. Yeah. And it's a whole, there's a whole other aspect of astrology called synastry. It's a Greek word, synastria, but it's really when you're putting like someone's chart on top of another chart to see what the relationship is. And then you can also create composite charts. So say if I want to check what my relationship with Colleen is, I can put down the day that I can put together our charts to create a medium, like a middle chart to show what our relationship is.
I have a quick question. This is Aditi. Can you hear me? So when I do you recommend any websites to actually like read charts on? And then if I, if my sun is in Cancer and my rising sign is Libra, should I go to those websites and read the Libra blurb?
Yeah. So
does that question make sense? Are there any sites, and what should I read about?
Yeah, you mean for horoscopes, right?
Yeah.
To see like what, yeah. So I love Channing Nicholas. That's a web. I can put it in the chat actually. Hold on a second.
And are horoscopes different from charts and what like astrology?
Yeah, great question, actually. So astrology is the study of all of these things. The chart is the moment, it's a snapshot of the sky, the moment you were born, the moment the event happened, the moment this endeavor started. That's a chart. It's a snapshot of the sky in that minute. Horoscopes is the study of the transits. So you have the chart, and then but the planets still kept moving around. So you're looking at the relationship of the planets that still are moving as they relate to different positions on the chart. So that's horoscope. So when astrologers are writing horoscopes, they're looking at the transits that are coming up, and they are picking. We're like, oh, this thing seems important. So you just relate it to what is happening to the chart. So if you are to be reading your horoscope, you should be reading Libra first. You can also read Cancer, but Libra first. Also Cafe Astrology. Do you have that, Colleen? I can send it. I can send like a few links when we send the presentation and the lovers play sheet. I'll send like a few links for that. There's a question in the chat. If you were born after 5 p.m., does that mean you were born at night? Oh, I see. What are the cutoff times to determine day versus night? That's a really good question. The chart has horizon points. So your rising sign is, if you're on Earth and you're being born, the moment that you're being born, it's the sign that is rising on the eastern horizon, which is where all the planets come up from, right? And where the sun comes up from. There is also the opposition, or as we call the descendant, right? Your ascendant is your rising sign, because that's what ascends. Where the descendant is the west or sunset. So as the planets move around, there's also a midnight and a noon. So depending on where you are, depending on the time of the year, and depending on the daylight savings, the sun will be in a different part of the horizon. So if you were born, at 6 p.m. in Greece in the summer, it's not night, because your sun is probably going to be a little bit before sunset. But if I look at a chart, I can tell you approximately what time you were born, if I see where the sun is, because it's like a clock. I don't know. It's like a weird whole day clock. So yeah. All right.
Thank you so much, Joanna. That was awesome, as always.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
We'll send the recording, and we'll send a link to the presentation from Joanna along with that worksheet to everyone who RSVP'd. Feel free to share it. We're going to post it to our YouTube so you can share it with people who might be interested in this. And I'll just say, if you're interested in diving in more to a specific area or to your chart in particular, we will share Joanna's contact information at Red Cat so that she can do a deeper dive for you personally and a more personalized reading.
Yeah, my favorite thing. Okay.